Hello, my name is Ravi Patel. I'm from Kansas City. My partner couldn't be here. He's in Geneva, and that is far away. So, I hope everyone's having a pretty fantastic evening. Looks like there's some snacks. That's always nice. So, I'm going to. Oh, yeah. So, randomly, I was talking to one of my buddies, and we were talking about how polling played a pretty big role in 2016 here in America, if you guys have heard. And so I was talking to him. I'm like, maybe I can do this a little bit better. There's a couple of tweaks that need to be made. Overall, the idea makes sense. Uh, so ended that call with him. I'm like, I'll continue thinking about it on my own. 10 minutes later, he sends me a message. Hey, so and so wants to talk to you about uh, something interesting that might be up your alley. And so hop on the call, and that's is between me, my mutual friend, and Tudor, future co-founder of the company. He's like, what do you think about polling right now? I'm like, what are the chances that we both are talking about this at the same time, 10 minutes apart, when he's at that point in Romania and I'm in Kansas City? And so we began to work on this project, and it turned in to be input. And so I'll kind of jump in and introduce the problem set. So politicians, activists, small, medium enterprises need polling and market research, but currently don't have a great option for that. Tools are expensive, engagement's pretty low. So what are we going to do for your neighborhood? So issues, market size. It's quite large. As you guys can imagine, stakeholders really want to know what people are thinking. So as you can see, 16 billion in 2010, projected almost 22 in 2022. 38% of businesses do surveys, so people are trying it out. Lots of petitions are going out to try and gain more impact on change.org, but not always perfect. You kind of have to bend the tool into working for you, depending on your specific criteria. Market costs are pretty insane. If you want to do a poll on Pew or Gallup, as you can see, that would be a quantitative research, 30 to 55,000. Those numbers are on average. Sometimes they can go up to 150, just depends on what you're looking for. Phone surveys, everyone loves getting an automated phone call and answering a 10 to 15 minute survey, so those are fun. Online surveys, YouGov and whatnot, they do okay. They're not as expensive, but tough to get a random sample at times. Engagement levels. So, as you can see, there's a problem. Engagement's really low, and therefore, if I want to have a phone survey of 1,000 people, I need to call even more people to try and get feedback. And so the scale kind of breaks after a certain point, and you're calling at one point, 28 out of 100 will answer your survey. Now you're at 7. So you have to call that many more people to attempt to get the same information. Therefore, the costs continue to rise for doing polls. So completing surveys is lonely. This is true. No one likes to be lonely. There's no interaction between you and your neighbors or anything like that about what is actually going on. That is a slight problem. You don't know if you got anyone else involved to actually vote on something that can potentially make a difference within your community. Maybe I want a new bike lane, bus stop. If I'm a developer, maybe I want to put a new ramen shop in the neighborhood. God knows what. There's no transparency. Methodology and everything is quite hidden. I think there's been a new development lately. New York Times, the upshot, they began doing live polls, and so you can see how many calls are made, what were the respondents, and all of that. But another issue that comes up is we don't know the questions that are asked, so the rhetoric and the psychology but behind the questions also plays a role in what the outcome actually is. And so there's some problems there. We don't know what questions were asked in a poll, we just know the outcome of the poll itself. So slight problem there. Also, And the last issue on this particular one, we don't actually know what impact a poll has. I go on top of the cliff, I yell into the ether, and I hope that somewhere like around the world something positive happens. But we don't know. It's just out there. So couple of problems. So what Input is a blockchain-based polling platform that allows for organizations and businesses to make changes within their communities. We're kind of trying to attack from the grassroots and go up instead of going from the top all the way to the bottom, which a lot of people do. I'm sure there's opportunities there, but sometimes you don't actually see what difference it makes within your community. This slide basically reiterates what I just said. That's cool. So what do? So we have a bunch of different aspects within our platform that remedy a lot of the problems that we have seen with other tools in the marketplace. Starting with affordability, we have found ways to do this cheaper. We'll close the loop between you doing a poll and then immediately seeing impact that it has within your community. Community oriented, so sometimes it's difficult to really understand what is going on in your community unless you're engaged or you actually talk to people in your community. And so we're going to try and remedy that situation using automated polling and a couple of different other technologies that we'll be working on to try and really hone in on what is going on within your neighborhood. And so that will kind of help out in terms of keeping people on the platform and actually being interested. If I know that there are some polls going on about, like we talked about earlier, on my street to get a new bike lane or bus stop or whatever, it could be anything, then I'm actually going to be incentivized to answer questions. And so that's kind of cool. So these were the initial mock-ups that we had a long time ago. Originally, we were planning on doing almost pretty exclusively political polling. And such, you have constituencies and these particular aspects of it. But after some time, we have continued to refine our process. We surveyed people on their interest in a polling application, the irony. And so we came to a conclusion that okay, well, this was a great start, and there's something there. We have identified that the problem exists, and we've continued to refine the process into where we are now. And so that is, well, this is a vertical, but that is actually incorporating small businesses and local communities and neighborhood-focused polling into people's lives. Business model is relatively straightforward. Sponsored polls, let's say a restaurant wants to try and optimize their menu. 5 items on their menu sell great, the other 4 don't. They want to do a survey and figure out what other items on the menu would sell a little bit better so they can make more money. And so we can help them increase sales and whatnot. And that can go all the way up into DNC, RNC want to know what people's thoughts are on a particular subject. Won't get into details about all of that. So that's a straightforward approach, sponsored polls. Public opinion analysis. This is where automated polling comes into place. And so with this, as we're doing those polls and whatnot, you can kind of get a report every month on what is actually happening within your community if you are a stakeholder, local political actor, maybe a community activist. They will find a lot of value in that particular type of output. And then predictive market research. After we get a lot of information, we can then go out and have a better understanding of what people might want. So as we get a bunch of these responses in, we can build a larger knowledge graph, and then from there we can do predictive analytics on that as well. But that's well down the line and requires a bit of information, but it is within within our roadmap. The slide you guys have been waiting for. So with the blockchain, we've talked about all of the issues that come up, and this is why we've been talking to Sasha, Tufi, Dan, Jane, everyone at Toda about some of the issues that we ran into. So we did a quick proof of concept to try and get an idea of what the costs are going to be for, let's say, transactions, and it was quite expensive. Along with that, making sure that users have greater power over their information. These are the two big items that we really want to tackle, along with the transparency. And so there are a lot of improvements that can be made on the existing platforms, in my opinion. And I think that there is some aspects of the Toda protocol that really resonate with what we are trying to do going forward. And so, well, that's why we're here. Competition, you guys are familiar with some of these, maybe less familiar with others, but for the sake of time, input is like the cross-section between all of these. There's tons of good stuff here, but I don't want to take up too much time. It is getting towards the end of the evening. So, once again, a little bit more drilled down versions of some of the top players in the market from the previous slide. There's a lot of information there. I won't get into the details about everything, but you guys get it. There's a lot of pitfalls within a lot of the platforms out there. There's stuff that they do well, and we're trying to kind of bridge the gap in all of the different offerings out there to try and make something that's a little bit more suitable from like a local level that we can kind of grow into a larger ecosystem. Timeline. So initially, we're going to do a prototype in Kansas City. From there, move to Brooklyn with the MVP, and then continue on with a minimum marketable product also in Brooklyn. The reason we chose Brooklyn as our second market is because there are, give or take, 30,000 plus SMEs that we would like to target, tons of local businesses about, and so it makes a lot of sense to get into that market. Kansas City, if we chose this, well, that's where I'm based out of. Also, if you can win in a relatively hard market, then you can probably win in a little bit easier one, I'm guessing. Assuming that people in Brooklyn are pretty progressive and open to new ideas. This is my co-founder, Tudor. He has quite a few accolades. Forbes contributor, worked in another political company called GovFaces, PhD in political science. My background is, well, I've done a lot of consulting work, pretty heavy background in natural language processing, data science, some computer vision. And so we feel like we have a pretty good mix of execution and subject matter expertise where we can actually execute upon this project. And from there, there's a quote. I won't read that to you, but there it is.